I am Rachel Humphrey with DEI Advisors. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering personal success within the hospitality industry. And I am delighted to be joined today by Anu Saxena from Hilton Supply Management. Anu, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rachel. It's great to be here with you. And I'll just say, by the way, I've listened to a lot of your lineup. Kevin, Leslie, Mitch Shah, Michael Dietermeyer. I could go on. I'm very, very honored to be included. Thank you for having me.
Well, that is great to hear. And we are excited to have you join us today and get to share a little bit about your journey and the lessons you've learned along the way. And since you've listened before, you know that one of the things I really love about the hospitality industry is how incredibly unique everybody's journey to leadership is. We can have very different paths along the way, but both find ourselves in positions of leadership. Tell us a little bit about your path and maybe some of the inflection points along the way that you think have really impacted your career.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a great question. And look, what I'll say is I didn't grow up. You've said, we have an amazing industry, and I heard a lot of the stories in some of the recordings that you guys have already done. And one thing that makes my path a little different is that I didn't kind of start in hospitality. I didn't grow up in hospitality, but I knew Rachel from an early age. I was very conscious of this concept of journey and career path. Growing up in Asia, you basically have to declare your major when you're in elementary school. And I was my parents as well. They were from a very young age. They instilled this idea of always having a plan for yourself. So I knew in elementary school that I wanted to study in the United States. I had an opportunity to visit my aunt who still lives actually in Columbus, Ohio. And I knew right away, for many reasons, that this is kind of where I want to be, and I want to study here. So, I joined university here, migrated to the US. And, while I was in college, I knew that I wanted to be in management consulting. So, I sought out people that were young consultants. I learned about their journey. I knew that's where I wanted to be. So after university, I joined a management consulting firm. And I spent a little bit over a decade in management consulting. And again, like everything, having a little bit of a plan. While I was in consulting, as you get exposed to many different industries. And as a young kind of professional, you're dealing with executives of many different companies. And you're really, it's an incredible learning opportunity. I knew that there were, after a decade or so of doing this, there were two things kind of that stood out to me while I was in consulting. One was discipline of, the CEO and the executive team. And the second thing for me was culture. I could really tell a difference as I went to all these Fortune 500 companies, those that had an incredible culture. So, I know those were two things that I kind of wanted when I decided to take a role in industry and get out of consulting. So, it was quite serendipitous that Hilton moved at their headquarters here into Northern Virginia, my backyard. And, it was a company that I knew had incredible discipline and an incredible culture. So that's how I found my calling in hospitality.
That's incredible. And how aware at such a young age that the importance of discipline and finding a company or corporate culture that matched what you were looking for. I think that for a lot of us, that has been trial and error, but you being able to identify at that point in your career that was something that was important to you. What great advice. Something else that I know is really important to you is getting involved with associations and nonprofits. And I've been a great admirer of the work that you have done as part of the Board of Trustees for the AHLA Foundation. And I really have two questions about this. One is, why is this work so important to you? But also, many of us have learned very different leadership skills or lessons through our roles with associations and nonprofits that are very different from the skills maybe that we develop in the corporate world. Can you talk about those two things a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I know, you know the foundation really well. I think that the foundation is just simply incredible. I'm By the way, I'm so excited about Anna Blue's appointment. I think she'll be a tremendous leader as we go forward. I'm getting to know her, and every time I engage with her, I'm very, very excited for the future of the foundation. I always leave every interaction I have with the foundation, I leave it more and more impressed. I mean, firstly, it's an invaluable contributor to our industry. And I frankly find it a bit guilty because I take away so much more from the foundation, from the experience, than I feel like I can ever give back. But I'm learning a lot from being on the board. And look, it's been very meaningful. I mean, just the network of people and connections that you make, as part of the board, the broader AHLA board. It's not something you think about, any nonprofit for that matter, right? It's not something that you necessarily think about as you're considering it, but it inevitably ends up being such a meaningful experience because you get to meet these connections. And the foundation itself, look, the work that they're doing, that we're doing on diversity, equity, inclusion, the resources that have been made available to the industry at large, the incredible, obviously, the apprenticeship program, and now, no room for trafficking. I mean, the impact on our industry, I think, is just incredible. I would say from a leadership perspective, what has really impressed me and continues to is this network effect. You have people from all these different companies, different cultures, different priorities that all come together and collaborate on to solve, some really tough problems with tremendous dedication. So, I think the recognition that when you have the right people working together with, a singular focus, you can solve big problems. Nothing seems out of reach. So I feel that, particularly inspiring.
Well, that's a great lesson too, that especially as you build your network across many different aspects of the industry, because I think from a relationship building standpoint, we can get very tunnel visioned in what we're doing as far as building our network or growing relationships. And I will tell you, I just interviewed Anna, so you'll have to add that to your playlist as well to get to know her a little bit better. I love to share with our audience why I have invited someone to be a guest on DEI Advisors, that historically they have been people who've really had an impact on my career or inspired me in some way. And shortly after I transitioned from attorney to the association executive space, you and I were at a women's development event together through Hilton. And I heard you talk about how it wasn't a lack of women in the supplier world, the brand world, the ownership world. It's that they weren't getting credit for anything that they were doing. And that what we really needed was to celebrate the tremendous women in hospitality and really shine a light on this amazing group of successful entrepreneurs, of successful leaders, that somehow they seem to take a back seat a little bit more. And I really loved that perspective. I had not heard anyone very publicly, unabashedly say it's time to start celebrating women in our industry. And so I thank you for that perspective early on, because that really shaped a lot of how I saw things and celebrating other women. But that leads me to this concept of building a more diverse industry at the leadership level. There's a lot of talk about it in hospitality right now. From your vantage point, and you may wear two hats for this, but from your vantage point, what do you think the hospitality industry needs to do to see greater movement in that goal for more diversity?
Firstly, thank you for remembering that. I'll say right away that the good thing right away is that there's been a lot of change since we first had that conversation already. And I'm by the way, I'm proud to be a small part of that. I think that as an industry, I mean, look around. I mean, by the way, look at your docket of folks that you've interviewed, and the D&I Advisors has interviewed. Incredible stories of fabulous women all around the industry. So, I do want to acknowledge that there's been tremendous progress that has been made just in the, 12 years that I've been, part of the industry, and part of Hilton. So I think, that's important, that the industry is taking note, that there's a pipeline of incredible women, right, that are now finding their footing and finding themselves in leadership roles, which I think is obviously a great way to continue the journey of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The other thing I'll say is, I think diversity, equity, inclusion, these things mean different things to different people. And I love the work that you all are doing by getting these perspectives all on the table. It may not just mean gender diversity or whatever the case might be. Everybody has a different, I think, takes away different perspective of what it means to be part of this initiative and what it means to make our industry more unique and more diverse. I think we've brought in people from outside the industry in several leadership roles over the last years. Look at Anna Blue as a great example of somebody that's come in from outside the industry. That in itself brings some diversity to the industry. So I like to make that point. In fact, Rachel, I'll say that's something even I've learned, over the last decade, is that, although there should be, and there has rightfully been focus on certain elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think we also need to celebrate now the fact that we're bringing in true diversity of experience into leadership roles, and it'll go a long way. It already has.
Well, that's a great point. Not just, I liked what you said too about kind of the collaborative approach. It's not just a women's issue or another issue. It's industry wide, and collaboratively is how we're going to make that progress moving forward. I know that you are a strong believer in continuing to grow and develop skills and thought and experiences. Talk about where you turn to for resources. What are some of the places or the strategies you use when you either identify a skill you want to develop more, or you want to continue to, as just a human, continue to grow?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. I mean, and I think, by the way, this is one that when I've listened into some of your earlier interviews, I've paid attention to what people have said about this question. I'll say that, look, one of the great kind of cultural hallmarks of growing up in Asia is that from a very young age, right, there's importance placed on education, just this mere fact of learning. And there's recognition given to the fact that learning is kind of a lifelong quest, So I think for me, I was grateful for that from a young age. I also think that what happens is, as you progress through your career, it's a challenge really to remind yourself to keep in that growth mindset, as we refer to now. I think as we rise to more senior positions, we're conditioned to kind of assume the role of the expert. I think I might have talked to you about this in one of our encounters. We just we feel like we have all the answers, and I think so. So first, I would say we all have to have some self-awareness, but then we need to dedicate time for continued learning, and that really does require at these levels some unwiring to push yourself. And to kind of create and then feed that kind of appetite for growth. For me, I'll say, it's less about resources. I think there's plenty of resources in our industry. I think it's more about being mindful, thoughtful about seeking those people out whose experiences I can learn from. And that drive me towards that growth mindset, that remind me that, my learning journey is not yet complete, because, the reality is, like we talked about, our industry has an enormous bench of leadership, of some very inspiring stories, very successful stories. So I would say in that respect, it's like seeking out those people, of making more connections, like you said, through the foundation and otherwise, of really listening more intently, asking questions, all in the spirit of being open to what you can learn from anyone at any time.
Well, and such an important lesson about being a lifelong learner, that we don't reach a certain level in our career and then we're done learning. And I think that's one of the consistent themes we hear a lot from the DEI advisors, is this idea of continued curiosity, continued lifelong learning, that even when we achieve a level of success, we're not done yet. So that's great.
I like that. I'm going to write that down. Continuous curiosity. I like that.
Yeah. Related to that, you just said you seek people out, which is a perfect segue to talking a little bit about support systems. People know that I love the phrase a personal board of directors. I heard it last year, and it's been really impactful for me over the last year of trying to identify that personal board for myself. Do you rely on a strong support system? And if so, what types of things do you turn to your support system for? How do you identify the right people to fill those board seats for you?
Yeah, another great question. Yeah, yes, the answer is yes, I do, very much so. And I think, men, women, folks that are new to the industry, folks that are veterans of the industry, we all should have a kitchen cabinet of trusted advisors. Um, I'd say, look, in terms of how I identify these people, and we talked a little bit about this in the growth mindset conversation, but I think you have to uh, pick the kind of people. The distinction is really who is helping you think big. Who's helping you to think bigger than big, and who's helping you think, long term, because it's important in our particularly in leadership levels. You need people that like are pulling you out from the present day, and that they're challenging you to pull up and think 5, 10 years down the line. It's hard to do, to take yourself out of the day-to-day minutia and challenge you in a way that is you're rising up, really, you're raising your game. So, who are these people that remind you to, the importance of responding versus reacting, or aligning to the right people that are opening and expanding your aperture. So that's kind of who I look for, and they're very easy to find. I mean, you said this at the outset, we have an amazing industry, and we're lucky that we have no shortage of these folks in the industry. So, it's really, again, being conscious and thoughtful about how you're seeking these people out that are helping you becoming literally a bigger version of yourself.
I love the concept of thinking big. And I actually think that one of the things that a lot of us do is we limit our own potential in our own heads. And one of the things we hear from a lot of emerging leaders is that sometimes the voice in their head is not as positive as the outside voices of people supporting them, the people like you that are
So
encouraging them
true.
to think bigger. And, interestingly, this is one that I've spoken to some people about, and they're like, what, I don't always have a great answer for that. I don't know that I can advise others. I'm not sure I can advise myself sometimes how to get over it. What would you tell someone either about a strategy that you use, or if they're really struggling to have that voice in their head match up to the way others see them?
Well, have them call me, Rachel. Have them all call me.
Your phone's going to be ringing off the hook now.
I don't listen to it. I mean, I'm trying to kind of put myself in that. I'm proud to say that, and it requires work, but I'm at that point where I literally don't let, mentor once told me, actually, right here in this building, said that don't build these narratives in your head that don't exist. And just like everything else, you have to not pay attention to it, because why limit yourself, and why get in your own way? I mean, these are barriers that you're creating for yourself. And this is where I'll just say, this is where your trusted advisors really come in handy. When you feel like you're getting stuck and you don't know how to get unstuck, or you start kind of down the path of things that may or may not be true, lean on that group of trusted advisors, call on people that can help you see that, this is one of those things that you just need to kind of stop focusing on and pull yourself out of. So again, I mean, like, I literally mean this. Like, if people, they should lean on their trusted advisors. They should call me, lean on people around you that can help you see that you really are doing well. You're there because you're clearly doing extremely well. You're part of this incredible industry. And the more that you kind of untrain or retrain your brain to not think about these things, or not let it become the narrative of the day, the easier it'll get as it happens in the future.
Wow, that is very powerful advice. And I appreciate your sharing what works for you, because I have no doubt that'll work for others as well. Related to overcoming sometimes a negative narrative in our head is also a hesitation or a fear of advocating for ourselves. There's a generalization that, especially as women, we don't do a good job advocating for ourselves, maybe even celebrating our own successes. What type of advice would you offer to those, again, emerging leaders who might feel like this is a hurdle that they're going to have to overcome to really see their career go in the trajectory they're looking for?
I I I have a very simple motto that, again, an early mentor shared with me, I'll say, which is, and I know it's going to sound simple, but it's just lead with the work, lead with your work. The rest of it is just noise. And I think the more that we kind of, again, go back to, are we being the best version of ourselves, makes it easier. I think, look, it's easier said than done. I do understand this. We have complex roles, and the larger problems we solve, you deal with a lot of stimulus, and it's harder to really focus on just leading with the work. So, uh, what I ask people, Rachel, that come to me for advice on self advocacy is, number one, have you mastered what you're currently being paid to do? Because if you haven't, then you shouldn't be advocating for more. And the reality is, we don't get to decide for ourselves how we're doing, because frequently, we don't possess enough self awareness to. You just don't. And this might be a bit controversial, and I think some folks have mentioned this in some interviews, but I think this is where the importance of feedback comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid of it. By the way, the higher up you get, the more feedback you will have from customers, from guests, from your board, from everybody. So how you respond, um, and actually more importantly, how you incorporate feedback demonstrates enormous capacity. And look, I'll just say, I've learned this the hard way, by the way. I've learned this the hard way myself. But if you're really planning to raise your hand for that bigger position, for advocating for a larger role, the next opportunity, whatever it is, you have to find out how it is you're doing in kind of your current role, current one. And that requires, by the way, and these are all leadership elements of kind of growth. It requires you to show incredible humility, seek feedback, and then, the hard part, apply it.
Yeah.
So again, this is a question that I care a lot about, because I've had a lot of top talent in my own organization come and talk to me about career progression, and, they're ready for more. And Rachel, candidly, I've had to tell them, because here's what I will say, and you talked about diversity in the industry. I'll go back to that a little bit, is the only way we will have more diversity in the industry is that we can't be women, men, whatever it is, people that are rising up through their careers cannot shy away from feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And feedback doesn't mean that the person is not in your corner. In fact, it means just the opposite. Many times there's a misconception. This could be just a misconception that women don't receive feedback very well. And people are afraid to give them feedback because they don't know how it'll be perceived. And I would say, let's not play into that, because that's not, we should celebrate the fact that somebody cares enough about our growth that they're giving us, feedback that's going to truly get us to that next level. So, I'll go back to my question is, people will come to say, what do I need? I'm ready for this next level. And I have to candidly tell them that for these reasons, I don't believe they are. And those that have listened and applied that feedback have now moved on to, bigger, better things, and frankly have come back to say thank you. So I think that's important. Now, if you're feeling undervalued, and, there's other components, then that's a whole different conversation. And again, that's a great moment for you to lean into, one of your trusted advisors and kind of figure out how you want to move forward. But I'd say for the rest of us, master your current job, and then make your intentions clear about, what you want to do next. I mean, self-advocacy, is about, making sure the right people in the organization clearly know where your interests and intentions lie. And the hospitality industry, as you know, is filled with amazing companies that are loaded with, great opportunities. So again, how you apply your feedback, how you choose to raise your hand, make your intentions clear. I mean, these are all pivotal moments when it comes to self-advocacy.
No, that's great advice. I mean, feedback is a gift, and sometimes it's not easy to hear, and sometimes we have to be very self aware and very disciplined. But I love the idea of seeking that feedback to know and to be able to evaluate whether you're ready for that next step, and using then that feedback for positive growth, I think, is another really important lesson. So, thank you very much for sharing that. You mentioned a second ago being our best selves when you were talking about advocating for ourselves. And there seems to be right now a renewed focus on self-care and wellness among the workforce in general, among our colleagues. And that can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. Some people automatically go to the idea of exercise or nutrition and things, but self-care and wellness can mean different things to different people. How has this played a role, if it has, in your career so far? Has that changed over time? And what are you seeing now, whether it's as looking at the team around you, looking at your own commitment to it in this space?
Yeah, look, I think it's very important. I think that I've been very pleased to see the focus that's been placed on this in general, since post-COVID times, and more people at least are talking about it and sharing ideas. I think you have to define kind of what wellness looks like for you. Like you said, there's a lot of different ways to approach what self-care and wellness means. But I'll tell you, one thing is a non-negotiable. Taking care of yourself should never be an option. It should always be a priority. You can choose how you approach it. For me, spending time with my family is important. That makes me feel balanced. Finding time to do things properly is important. Time management is important for me. So pick what's important and then kind of make time to do it. I make a joke about this with my colleagues here at work that I've given up trying to, I have kids and I've given up trying to keep up with those sign-up geniuses that come out at school. Because, I mean, no matter how hard I try, I'm always the last one that sees those things. And by the time I get to it, it's all filled up. So, I've made a little ritual, Rachel. At the beginning of the school year, I call my kids' teachers and I let them know, kind of what I do. And I say, give me just 2 things in the year. These are the times that work on my calendar, and give me 2 things that I can either volunteer for or whatever in advance. So, that makes me feel like I'm kind of taking care of myself, and it makes me feel good. So, I'll just say, identify what truly makes you feel good, not just look good, but truly feel good, and then make a choice to incorporate that into your life.
That's such great advice. I laugh about the sign up genius because I used to say that I was the non-perishables mom. You need tissues, paper towels, decorations, anything I can buy at the start of the school year, I'll send in all year, but don't come to me for the cupcakes or the actual things that have a shelf life on them. So
I agree completely. I think I learned that early on too. I'll add one more thing if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
Rachel, I was thinking about it as you were talking. I would say, feedback is certainly a gift, but so is delegation. It's another tool. I'll just say, like, we as leaders, we have the power to delegate. So, we don't have to do everything ourselves, and we should not be afraid to enlist help. Delegation is also a gift. So, we should unwrap that box and put it to use. It's another way to find time to do things that are really important for us relative to, self-care and balance.
Well, and it helps support and elevate future leaders, because as you delegate, they are then learning new skills, new responsibilities, and getting new exposure to leadership to really help them shine as well. So that's a win-win as well. I know, as I told you at the top of the interview, I know we're going to run short on time because you have so many incredible things to share. Those who know me know that I love the question of advice to our younger selves. And part of it is because I think reflection is a really important part of our personal growth. But as you focused on earlier, we are works in progress, continuous growth, continuous curiosity, those types of things. So what would you tell today, 21-year-old Anu?
How much time do you have? It's a great question, one that we should ask ourselves all the time, because it truly, it kind of instills and invokes some self-reflection. Look, here's what I would tell my younger self, what I still tell my older self, Rachel, which is that I don't have to be in overdrive all the time. Um,
Mm,
which is it's just how I was raised. And there's a lot of, obviously goodness that comes out of it, but it's something I have to continue to remind myself. In fact, I think I'm a better leader when I put myself on neutral sometimes, to be honest. So, it's something I have to remind myself quite often. And the other thing I'll say is, and my trusted advisors again help me remember this, is just not to hold on so tight. Like it
mm.
all works out how it's supposed to in the end. And maybe that's a combination of just time in the water, experience, growing in role. But I really believe that.
That's such great advice. Thank you very much for sharing that. Then, just lastly, as we think of the motto of DEI advisors on empowering personal success, what is one final piece of advice you would offer to our listeners?
By the way, I love that tagline.
Oh,
I think
thank you.
I think it's great. I'm sure that a lot of people, can relate to it. I certainly can. I don't know if this is advice, Rachel, but just some thoughts. I think we live our whole lives, whether we're conscious of it or not. We're always susceptible to somebody else's plan for our success versus kind of carving out our own. At a young age, it's your parents' plan for you, then it's your teacher's plan for you, then it's your professor's plan, your boss's plan. I think it's so easy to follow a path with expectations that are set by others. So I think the only advice I'd give, or thoughts I'd share, is you have to really ask yourself every so often, what's my plan, and do I have what I need to pursue it, and am I pursuing it with an intention and focus that stays fixed on what it is what I want to do, not what somebody else expects from me. So I think you can learn from others for sure, but I think at the end of the day, you have to follow, your path, stick to your vision, because literally at the end of the day, it's your reason for success. It's your own path.
Wow, that's a tremendous way to wrap things up. Anu, on behalf of the hospitality industry, on behalf of my personal career progression, thank you so much for being such an incredible advocate for women and diversity in the hospitality industry and for your leadership. And importantly today, thank you for supporting the mission of DEI Advisors.
I've had a lot of fun, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
And to our audience, if you have enjoyed what you've heard today, we hope you'll go over to deiadvisors.org and hear from the over 75 industry leaders who are sharing their paths to leadership and the lessons they've learned along the way. You can also stream DEI Advisors on your favorite podcast streaming service. But Anu, thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.